Hello, Hannes, and welcome. I'm so excited to interview you today about hybrid events, and specifically about how to measure the success of hybrid events. Back in October, I interviewed VOK DAMS about hybrid events and how to implement and execute them. And this time we'll go more into details into the financial part of evaluation and attendee feedback. So before we begin, you are the director of strategy solutions at VOK DAMS. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your role, and we'll go into the questions.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Irina. So my name is Hannes Putzig. I'm the Director Strategic Solutions at VOK DAMS, and I'm heading the department that is responsible for all things event evaluation. So we, at the one hand, of course, do the strategy part before the event, setting the goals and objectives for the event, doing the guest insights, what do guests expect. Then the concept is done by a separate department, the execution is done by a separate department, and then we're oftentimes coming back into a project when it comes to the topic of evaluation, evaluating surveys and evaluating if success was achieved or not. So I'm heading a team of 6 people out of Berlin, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Excellent. So let's dive in straight into the topic. So what are the usual practices of measuring event success? For example, is it attendee feedback or the number of registrations? What are the criteria?
We have to differentiate maybe between the usual practices and the best practices, because what we see in the market is that usual practice is to measure, maybe just 4 or 5 KPIs that are really, that they don't have anything to do with each other. I totally agree with you. What is oftentimes measured is guest satisfaction with a quick survey at the end, or just some numbers like total number of participants. If it is a for-profit event, oftentimes, of course, revenue is measured. If it is a more corporate event, an internal event, usually a very important KPI is cost per participant. But this is oftentimes the usual practice to measure events is with just 5, 6 distinct KPIs. What is best practice into our projects, a quick look into our projects, what we try to achieve is always to make the KPIs work with each other, that these KPIs relate somehow to each other, that you can see the cause and effect. So what we see as best practice is when you actually try to combine KPIs over certain levels of goal setting, so that you can see, okay, satisfaction was measured by these KPIs, and because the satisfaction is high, we had high turnover or high revenue, so that the KPIs ladder up to each other. That's usually what we consider best practice. Yeah.
Okay, so you say about 4 to 5 KPIs per event.
That's usually what we see when we go into a project and ask, how would you evaluate the event? The clients can usually come up with 4 or 5 measurements, and what we try to do is we coach how to better set objectives, how to better measure the achievement of those objectives with KPI scorecards and with KPI systems, where the different KPIs, where we measure more, maybe 16, 20 different KPIs, but we measure them not randomly, like before with the 5 KPIs that they can come up with immediately, but we connect these KPIs in a way that they relate to each other.
Okay, so when we look at a hybrid event, so the live event and the online event should have different KPIs, or the KPIs should have some connection with each other? What would you say?
I would say that's true for all events, that KPIs should relate to each other, so that we can not only do the evaluation. Evaluation is was success achieved or not, basically, right? I can say, yes, I set out to achieve this target, this was my goal, and I can see with evaluation it was achieved or not. What we are aiming for is diagnosis. to answer the question, why was success achieved or not? And to answer the question, why was the success achieved or not, it is important to not only have quantitative KPIs and monetary value, and this so much revenue was achieved with this, I don't know, music festival, for example, because I can set out to achieve a certain number of revenue, but I will never know why I achieved this goal or not if I not also include qualitative KPIs, much more qualitative factors, and then also, as I said, and I will say it maybe throughout this interview again and again, if I don't set different goals and objectives on certain levels of thinking and then connect those. It's a little, maybe if you remember the balanced scorecard, a very old school model, but all of the modern KPI scorecards that are used in event controlling are essentially built on a balanced scorecard, where you set your goals and objectives in certain dimensions on different levels and try to connect them via a strategy map.
Okay. And what is event controlling?
Yeah, I love that you speak of event controlling. Usually people are just asking event evaluation. And as I said, event evaluation is something that is, you do post-event, you do after the event, you maybe do a survey, and then the event is evaluated. Event controlling, for me, is a much more holistic concept. A concept where you, before the event starts, not only before the event starts, but before the event conceptualization starts, you set out to achieve certain objectives. Events are, or should, I should say, should be planned with a purpose in mind. And I have a lot of clients, when I ask them what is the purpose of the event, they cannot really answer this question. They say, yeah, because we always went to this trade show, because this is how we always do it since 20 years. So it's a little bit of digging and maybe doing a strategy workshop to find out what is the purpose of this event? What are we trying to achieve here? And it is that goal setting and setting of specific objectives before the event that makes it, a controlling, kind of a controlling exercise where you have clear objectives at the end. You then monitor and control whether these objectives were achieved or not. You have the data generation, you have the analysis, and of course the evaluation at the end, but to then make decisions in the end whether to do it another time or do it differently. So I think the term event controlling is much more fitting than just event evaluation. And I see many people out there just, doing evaluation at the end and not thinking about the cross-functional controlling from end-to-end aspect of event performance measurement.
What is the average time of this process? When should it start?
Usually, as I said, we start before the event conceptualization. So before we at VOK DAMS develop an event concept, we start with it. And it's, of course, then depending on the event. Sometimes we do events that have, a preparation time of 1.5 years, with, up to several millions in budget. And sometimes it's a more short term. The important thing for me is that we start before the event concept development starts. We start with a clear purpose for the event, with clear objectives that are then broken down into specific SMART targets, specific, measurable. This is our objective. I don't know, we want to, what can be a good objective for an event if you, for example, as VOK DAMS sometimes do, organize test drives for a new car, then of course your overall purpose is to get awareness for maybe a new product, for a new car. And with this purpose and this objective of awareness, we now need to break it down into specific SMART goals. So what is a SMART measurable goal? I don't know, 60% awareness in the relevant target group. So 60% of our target group should know that the product exists in a post-event survey, for example. This is a specific SMART target that I set out before the event, and now I can design the event according to this target. What we see oftentimes is that the targets are post-rationalized. Then after the event concept is clear, the event is done, and now let's look at what we achieved. This is our 5 KPIs, and now we measure them, but we don't have a target set for them. and then we can declare success on basically anything.
Yeah, that's a very good approach and a very important one. So all the targets and measurements you mentioned now, are there any measurement practices that can be regarded as vanity metrics, and in fact they don't mean anything?
Yeah, very good question. Of course, the usual answer is it depends on the event. I cannot say this is a clear vanity metrics that people are measuring, but as I have briefly said before, there are a lot of measures that people take just to take the measure, that don't really say anything. I would say, for example, if you measure awareness, of course, or let's say if you have a for-profit event, then of course the number of participants, the number of guests, coming to a festival, for example, if you sell entry tickets for your event, then this is really important. Then that's a very important number. But for a lot of other events, this measurement of how many guests were there is a very arbitrary measure that does not really, is important and does not really connect to the overall purpose, and is not sufficient to measure the ROI of the event if you're planning a marketing event, because you don't want to have as many people as possible there. You want to have the right people there. You want to have the target group there, your buyers. And I see many events and many briefings where it's just about, we need to reach that many persons, we need to do that number of samples, for example. When I say, do you sample to the right audience? And a lot of, for example, trade shows. When I talk to clients, I ask, how do you measure the success of your trade show? And they answer, the booth was full. So it was a successful trade show appearance, right? The booth was full. Yeah, but but post-event, how many follow-ups did you have? How many business cards did you collect? How many leads did you really generate? That is the more important measure than just number of guests. So I would say it depends on the event, but of course, number of guests is a very, very arbitrary measure that you should be careful to have set as your only objective to achieve. That is maybe a way to put it.
Yeah, that's true. I've heard this before. Our booth was full. Moving to the next question, what are the key performance indicators, as we discussed KPIs, and how to measure them?
Yeah, these are actually maybe 2 or 3 questions in one, right? So as I said, key performance indicators are for me the smart operationalization of broader objectives. Your event has a purpose. You come up with maybe 3, 4 distinct objectives that you try to achieve, and the KPIs are merely the process of how you measure if this objective was achieved or not. I don't know, maybe you have heard of this OKR methodology, Google by objective and key results, and this is maybe a little bit fitting to that. So you set out to achieve an objective, and you measure if this objective was achieved or not by a key result. And if you work at Google, you need to set these OKRs, these objectives and key results for yourself on a quarterly basis. So key results or key performance indicators are basically the same. A key performance indicator for me is a way to measure if an objective was achieved or not. So you set out, you set your objectives for the event, and then you need to define how do I measure it. As I said before, I would always set the objectives on several levels. So on the basic level, I need to have a look, is the right audience there, the target group, right? So I can be very specific and set out 2, 3 objectives for this target audience horizon. For example, I can say I want C-level to be there, C-level attendees. Or I can say I want at least 200 persons for each tour stop there. All of this is possible. These are clear objectives. And then you transfer it into a KPI by making it smart, by making it quantitative. A KPI is always something quantitative. And you can also quantify qualitative measurements, of course. So on On a target group level, I think this is clear, what kind of objectives you can set for yourself. But if we go one step higher, you would ask for, okay, the right people are there, but are they satisfied, right? You would ask for their satisfaction. And satisfaction, of course, is a very qualitative measure, right? And if you now set a KPI for this qualitative dimension, you need to quantify it a little bit by asking, for example, how satisfied were you on a scale from 1 to 5? And then people can, you know, like on Amazon, give the star rating. I give 4 out of 5 stars. And that basically is, as I said, a quantification of a qualitative number, a qualitative dimension. So it's a reduction of a complex reality. You know, the reality is complex. Yeah, I like this and I did not like this, but now I need to give a number. I need to give 4. So it's a reduction of the complex reality. And this is achieved via a KPI so that you can actually measure it. A KPI is always a smart, specific, measurable, time-bound target. So
I have a follow-up question. So now, especially with virtual events or hybrid events, there's a lot of engagement also on social media when people share what they liked about the event, or they share some quotes from the speakers. Can you measure this? Does it count as a positive feedback or a satisfaction? If someone writes on social media, what's a great event, I loved this speaker.
Yeah, this is definitely a valid option to measure satisfaction, not only by a survey, which is one option, of course, to send out a survey afterwards, but also by measuring the social media response. There's a tactic or a method called media resonance analysis, where you analyze not only the number, you can set yourself targets, specific targets for a number of feedback coming in via social media, but you can also measure the sentiment. How are people talking about your event online? And you can set specific goals for this. We want to have, I don't know, 500 positive reviews on Instagram after the event. The most important thing is set yourself targets that you're trying to achieve and do your concept after you set your targets, because this is how you make sure you achieve your targets. Most of the times, you know, people just measure without any clear indication of what is the goal and what are we trying to achieve here. So definitely, I would agree with you that this is a good way to measure success.
And I know that right now a lot of organizers are struggling with the fact that let's say, there are 500 registrations, but only 130 people show to the live stream. Mm-hmm. Is it a good measurement, or is it a bad measurement that you have 130 people when you have 500 email addresses? How would you approach this?
I think it totally depends, of course. I cannot answer this. It totally depends on the content of your event, on the way you communicated it before. Was it communicated well in advance, or, you know, did you invite for an event for tomorrow? So this is, of course, something that it comes down to the individual event. The KPI to measure no-show rate, right? That's a classical no-show rate. If people, I mean, depending on what you mean specifically, I can measure how many people are on my email list, right? And compare that to how many people have been attending the event. Or I can, this would not be no-show, right? This is more on the upper side maybe. But I can also measure no-show in terms of how many people registered, how many people finally showed up. So this would be classic no-show, which is the measurement that and a KPI that we very often include into our KPI scorecards, because it is important. But for some industries and for some circumstances, a 20% no-show is something that is a really good outcome. For some industries, it's the reverse. It's 80% no-show is normal. So you have to be really looking at the individual event to assess if this is a good outcome or not.
Yeah. So industry specific, event specific, and KPI specific. Yeah. Should we compare events to each other, or each event should be measured and evaluated individually?
Again, I think it comes down to the individual event. Of course, if you do an event series, You know, if you do an event multiple times, it would be a shame. A shame on you if you don't compare the individual events against each other, right? So you want to have this continuous improvement process where you try to come up with a concept for the first event. You measure if success as you defined it in your SMART targets was achieved or not, and then you change it for the second iteration and for the third iteration and so on. So if you do an event multiple times, of course, it is very, very important to compare the performance of the individual events. Also, we're right now doing an event evaluation, for example, for a truck tour with several truck tour stops. And we want to compare also performance of the protagonists delivering the event, and to compare, okay, this host is a good host, or this, you know, moderator is a good moderator. If you have several, that's really important. Second, this is the first, maybe what I want to say. Second, of course, if you have goals with if you have events with similar goals, they can be compared, even if they are not organized by you. If you, this is basically what a benchmark is all about, right? You do benchmarking, you compare, for example, your event against the events of competitors or other, event organizers, and for that, everything that you can get in terms of numbers and raw data from your competitors, and you can see, okay, how many people did attend this event and so on. This is valuable info, and in this sense, of course, you should compare also those events that have the same target, you know, that have the same purpose. What I would not advise to do is to compare events with different purposes and different targets, right? Don't compare the spend on your, you know, on your trade show with the spend on your, I don't know, small scale activation with the sales team where you have a seminar or something like this. So for this, it is really important that you don't have these arbitrary measures and then compare it in a sense like, okay, I reached this many people there and I reached this many people there, because then also if you compare events with other communication measures, events will always lose, because it is an expensive tool, right? If you compare it to newsletter marketing. And I mean, we are smiling right now, but I had one executive telling me, I reach 10,000 people with my newsletter. Why do I have to do an event for 100 people? I don't reach that many people with events. When, of course, you reach a different audience with a different level of emotional involvement and so on. So it's important that you don't compare with arbitrary measures, but compare with the right KPIs. You know, of course, the revenue outcome of the event will be different than the revenue outcome and the opportunities and bookings for a newsletter. So you can compare it in that sense. So to answer your question, it's difficult. You know, you have to be detailed in what you compare and how.
This is a very good answer. Very good tips as well. Okay, so coming to our next and last question. Overall, it seems that events industry hasn't figured out the e-commerce component of virtual and hybrid events. Do you have tips for monetizing virtual and hybrid events?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because there's a lot of experimentation going on right now, right? Lots of people who did physical events prior to the Corona pandemic now had to shift to virtual and hybrid events with, you know, on-site safety measures and everything, but most of it is fully virtual, and now they need to monetize these virtual events, and that's a big question I get asked a lot. Again, I'm really sorry I cannot give a one fits all answer, because it totally depends on the event. On the content of the event, what kind of money you can ask participants to pay. What I would say is this: I think that a good starting point to think about this is 1 hour, 100 euros. In a B2B context, that's usually, you know, for a 2-hour high quality content webinar, or if we do a 2-day conference virtually, or if I just do, you know, half an hour talk. Usually 100 euro per hour is a good starting point, but there can be, please don't say it is always 100 euro per hour. There can be dramatically changes from this, going down and going up, you know, depending on the content, depending on the target group, who is the guest. and what kind of experience do you provide? Is it just a normal webinar with On24, or is it a fully immersive virtual reality event that is also, of course, a digital or virtual event? So it is complicated in the sense of pricing. What I would say is more interesting than setting a final price tag for your event is, how do you ask people to pay? Is it just as you know it, you buy an entry ticket, or are there more intelligent and more innovative ways to ask people for money to attend your event? You can have all kinds of stuff. You can have a freemium model. You can have a subscription model where people pay on a monthly basis to attend several events. What we are now seeing is oftentimes upselling within the event. The in-app purchases that from your smartphone, that is really easily done with virtual events, that you sell the entry ticket for the event for a really low price. And then during the event, you say, do you want to join this workshop? Then it is, 99 euros to join this workshop. Or do you want to now join during a conference, for example, this very limited number of guests talk with this top CEO? 199 euros. You can pay now. You already have the credit card number in. So these kind of in-app purchases, in-event purchases, is something that we really watch currently, are experimenting with, and there are lots of opportunities, and it's the Wild West right now when it comes to monetization of events and virtual events. And this is exciting because there's lots to find out.
This is very interesting. I haven't heard of this model before. What do you think about in B2B, especially in offering the event for free and then just selling the actual service that you provide?
Also possible, of course, also possible. Always if you, sorry.
So now it seems that that's what everyone is doing right now. Just the event is for free, but with the aim to sell the end service or the product in the end.
It has the advantages and disadvantages. Of course, if you do anything for free, then you will have a high no-show rate. As we discussed before, right? People don't feel obliged. Usually we recommend, again, not always, but usually we recommend that you have at least a very small ticket fee, so that people feel that they also, it encourages you to come up with something valuable that people would actually pay for. That is essentially, that's a good experience to also check if your event program and your content is good, because you have to ask yourself, would people be willing to pay for it? And you should only put out content and only do events and deliver experiences where you think people would be willing to pay for that. Otherwise, asking people for just a small amount of money is a good check for yourself that you provide valuable content. And also, of course, it reduces no-show rates and also, has some excitement started at the end of the event participant.
Yeah, that's true. I also noticed that when you charge for an event, you also have more targeted audience who signs up. And also, when you as an attendee pay for an event, you also more critical about the feedback, and it stimulates the organizer to improve for the next time. So I think there are a lot of advantages, definitely, charging.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, Hannes, so that's all for today. Thank you so much for your excellent insights. I will definitely need to watch this again because there was so much information, so many new definitions to take notes and to apply for events, of course. So yeah, thank you very much. If anyone has a question to Hannes, how can we find you? How can we contact you?
You can contact me at hputzig@vokdams.de, VOKDAMS.de, or you can find me on Twitter at Hannes Putzig, or you can find me basically everywhere under my name, Hannes Putzig.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Hannes.
Thank you very much for the chance to talk to you, Irina. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.